Hey y'all, welcome back. Today we're checking out Brits are better than Americans at small talk. Here's why.
If you're British, I'm sorry to have to tell you this, but research shows that you spend an average of a whole week per year engaged in small talk. You could have spent it in Tenerife, but no, we just had to talk about the weather. Seriously though, small talk is a British national pastime. There are entire articles on how to master the art of talking about nothing like the British. But in this video, we're gonna dig into the cultural reasons behind small talk, including how Americans do it much differently and its history.
Y'all be sure to go to Girl Gone London and like and subscribe. I've never heard that Brits are better than Americans at small talk. I think I'm pretty good at small talk. Maybe I'm not. I've heard that Brits talk about the weather a lot, and talking about the weather is good small talk because we all have to deal with it. I've also heard Kaylin, Girl Gone London, say that British culture is a high context culture and American culture is a low context culture. So in Britain, the way things are said and what's around them, the situation around what's being said is more important than it is in America. So maybe that has something to do with it. I don't know. Let's check it out.
The very first appearance of the phrase small talk was in 1751, and this was by Lord Chesterfield, a British parliamentarian who was writing a letter to his son. In this letter, he
Look at him. Sexy.
defines small talk as a type of casual conversation that is neither too serious nor too silly, but it is necessary, in his opinion, to master.
Too
At
silly.
the time, his small talk suggestions included the clothing of the troops, the marriages of the wealthy, and the wonderful balls and masquerades that were held around this time. Then, in 1758, Samuel Johnson says, "When two Englishmen meet, their first talk is of the weather. They are in haste to tell each other what each must already know, that it is hot or cold, bright or cloudy, windy or calm." So rest assured that when you participate in small talk, you are carrying on a historic tradition. It's practically patriotic. Now, across the pond, small talk was also seen as something that was necessary to learn and to be good at. A woman named Louisa Adams, wife to President John Quincy Adams, told him in the 1800s that small talk was going to be one of the most important ingredients in the recipe for a successful presidential run. Today, small talk is something we still do, sometimes
She's right.
realizing it, sometimes not, but it's really the art of filling silences, breaking the ice, and avoiding awkward moments.
Interesting. Yeah. It puts people at ease. It gives you something to connect through. And when it comes to running for president, it probably makes you seem like an ordinary person to be able to talk about those things. The weather, uniforms, small talk.
So why are the Brits associated with small talk when it is something done in conversations around the world? It's because they take it to the next level. The whole purpose of small talk is politeness and acting as a sort of social lubricant. And British
Social
culture is
lubricant,
all about
yes.
smoothing things over, understating things, and generally being seen as being polite. So it's no surprise they're good at small talk. Before we talk about how the Brits do it though, let's take a quick look at how we do it in my homeland, the USA.
USA.
But it's about different topics and it serves a different purpose. In
Really?
the US, small talk is more about connecting instantly, as in making friends. It's
Yeah.
about finding common ground, shared enthusiasm, and potentially turning a stranger into a new pal.
Isn't that what all small talk is? I guess it's not.
We have exactly zero problem diving into compliments or questions about personal lives from the very beginning. I actually by nature use this a lot still, which can come across as overbearing or overly personal, especially in the south of England where I now live.
Okay, so in America, our small talk is more like an interrogation of someone's personal details. And I could see how maybe in a place that's like a little more guarded or trying to be a little more polite, where that would be kind of taboo, or that would be something that that's a line you don't cross maybe.
Now, this British internet poster had a hilarious recall of a time that they met an American in line in a breakfast buffet in the UK. As I'm putting my slice of bread on the toaster, this American also comes to toast his bread. We waited together for about 5 minutes. In this time, he told me about where in the States they lived, who they flew with, where they've been so far, what they're doing in London today, where they're going to next, what they've done while they're here, and how long they've got left on their holiday.
All right.
I think he was talking to me, but it could have also been a general PSA for the whole restaurant. He filled the room with his voice, but at the same time, he wasn't shouting. impressive.
Huh, okay.
Americans might say, hey man, I love your jacket. Where'd you get it? Then
Yeah.
you start asking questions like, what do you do for work? How many kids do you have? Where were you on 9/11? Just the most intensely personal things about your life that we feel we should know within the first 5 minutes. And when it comes to tone, Americans go big or go home. Typically, they're not gonna go home. They're just gonna go big. The energy in American small talk is raised. If you say, where are you from? And someone says, Orlando, an American response in this small talk situation might be something like, oh my God, you're from Orlando? That's so cool. Cut to a Brit who may say something more along the lines of, oh, Orlando. Interesting, with maybe a slight nod. Though they might not even get to this point because asking questions of someone is not actually the British small talk way.
I feel like asking where someone's from is like one of the very first things you ask someone. Here. But is she about to tell us that in Britain that's not what you do?
Because asking questions of someone is not actually the British small talk way. Because the point of British small talk is not to make a new friend. It's not to get to know a person. It's about getting through the social interaction in the most neutral, least potentially offensive way, and most polite way possible so you can move on with your day.
Really?
That means that the topics in British small talk are almost prescriptive. Traffic is one, or public transportation, whichever suits. Was the bus late? The train packed? Not as much traffic as you expected? More than you expected? These are all things to comment on.
Okay, interesting. So the Brits are observing the outside world with their small talk companion, whereas Americans are looking at the person, small talking about their small talk companion. I don't know if this has anything to do with this, but it's reminding me of similar difference between relationships between men and relationships between women. Like when a man is with his friend, you're looking at the outside world together. But when a woman is with her best friend, they're looking at each other. The two dudes are looking out. Hey, look at that. Look at that mountain over there. Wow, that's a big mountain. Yeah, we should climb that mountain. Yeah, let's do it. And then they go climb the mountain. But the two women would be like, oh my God, I love your hair. Thanks, I used this new product on it. That's great. I'm so happy for you. I love the level of curl. Yeah, isn't it great? I love it. I love you. I love you too. I treasure our friendship. I treasure our friendship too. I love you so much. I love you so much. Kiss on the cheek. Anyway.
Not as much traffic as you expected, more than you expected. These are all things to comment on. You can also talk about the week. Not what actually happened in the week, but literally the weekdays. Everybody hates a Monday, everybody loves a Friday. And most days in between are far from one and close to the other, and you can comment on it. But the most important one is weather. British weather changes rapidly, which is fantastic for small talk because you really can always say something a bit different depending on the day or even the time of day. Maybe it's sunny or cloudy or rainy, warmer than expected this time of year, or too cold out. It's safe, it doesn't take much thought, and no one can be offended because you said it's a nice day today, or freezing out there, or commenting on the changing of the seasons because it's not like you're in charge of it. It just builds a friendly environment and people feel safe within this space. An American would probably turn weather small talk into something about themselves, like the fact that their two kids, Belinda and Glinda, love the snow, and their husband Chad had to shovel it out of the driveway, but last week he hurt his back, and that's a problem because his company doesn't have good insurance, and we're only in minute one. But
Chad loves to shovel snow.
Hurt his back, and that's a problem because his company doesn't have good insurance, and we're only in minute one. But Brits keep it so wonderfully surface level, so nondescript, that this is why they are the masters of small talk. And there are two other aspects of British small talk that we need to mention to understand how it operates, because it's different again between cultures. The first of these two is when to small talk.
So, like, I'm thinking about times when I meet new people, like at a party or at a bar or wherever. Whenever we are commenting on the outside world around us, whatever we're experiencing in this location, it is a lot more comfortable than whenever the person turns to me and starts asking me questions about myself, interrogating me. What do you do for work? Where do you live? Where are you from? What's a da-da-da? It suddenly becomes like an interview, you know? And then you start feeling, or I start feeling a little guilty for talking about myself, and then I ask them question. I'm like, well, where are you from? Oh, where are you? And then they're like, oh. But if we keep the conversation about the world around us, we don't ever have to feel that way. I'm also reminded of when adults communicate with children. Whenever an adult is hanging out with a kid, like a teacher, aunt, uncle, whatever, and you're commenting on the outside world, whatever you're experiencing together, it's like playtime. They're playing and they enjoy it. But whenever you start asking the kid, how do you like school? Who's your friend at school? What are you learning at school? Do you play soccer? The kid kind of shuts down a little bit and gets a little self-conscious maybe, or like they don't know the answer to these questions, or they're confused by it. So I've noticed with kids, it's best to like just play, just comment about stuff. Don't make it about the kid. But I'm just putting this together in my mind. That's the same for adults, I guess. We don't like to be interrogated. Some people love talking about themselves, I will say that. But most people don't. Or I can't say that. I don't know. This video is putting a lot of concepts together for me about communication. Y'all, I'm learning.
So nondescript that this is why they are the masters of small talk. And there are two other aspects of British small talk that we need to mention to understand how it operates, because it's different again between cultures. The first of these two is when to small talk. Just because Brits are great at small talk doesn't mean they particularly feel like making it in most situations when it's far easier to ignore a person. So small talk in the UK is more used for when you have to interact with someone. Maybe it's the man serving you a baguette at the cafe, maybe it's the colleagues you have a meeting with, or your coworkers, or some other situation where it would just be categorically rude to not acknowledge the other person. But in other situations, like if you're the only two people in a lift or elevator, or you're standing in line next to someone waiting for something, or someone you don't know sits on the bus next to you, this is an opportunity to look heavily involved in the newspaper you're reading, or the music you're listening to, or looking so far in the other direction that you do not risk making eye contact.
I get that.
Americans, on the other hand, will try and small talk you literally wherever. I was in line at a water park in the US last year and ended up in a whole conversation with a family I've never met before, who were telling me there's a new stepdad in the family and their whole life story. People I know have met new friends via small talk while floating next to them in a lazy river in the US, while waiting behind them in the line at a grocery store. There are very few limits as to where you small talk in America. And the final element of British small talk is that there is often a joy in shared bonding by complaining. This does not translate in all cultures, particularly not in the US, but in the UK, it does.
Okay. A common enemy. I feel like whenever in America, sometimes when you try to commiserate with someone by complaining about something, a lot of times they will try to perk you up, make you feel better about it. Oh, it's not that bad. You're like, don't be so down. Don't be so. But no, I'm not depressed. I'm complaining about this thing just because it makes me feel better. And I want you to join me in complaining. Whining.
When you talk about the weather or the traffic, if you've got a little bit of complaint, it usually helps. Brits love a bit of a moan about something as a bonding ritual. So if the traffic was worse than normal, but the sky is beautifully clear, definitely go for the traffic complaint if you really want to succeed at small talk in the UK.
Okay.
Because there's not much someone can respond to, it's beautiful today, besides, oh yes it is. But if the traffic was awful, it gives them permission to join in, and you can bond about how annoying the new roadworks are, or that the council needs to sort that road out because it's always blocked around school time. Or you can turn it into wondering why it's so busy because there's no real reason for it. You get the idea.
Yeah.
And finally, you've got to finish the small talk at some point. If you're in a situation where you have to move on to other topics, like you're in a meeting, someone will usually say something like, right, let's get started. And that's a signal that small talk time is over. But if you're out in the wild, as it were, you would typically say something like, well, I won't keep you, insinuating that you're doing them a favor by leaving the conversation when in fact you both definitely want to leave the conversation. And you would finish with like, oh, nice to chat to you, and then move on with your day. It will be no surprise to all of you that Americans are different in that respect, and I have to be honest and tell you that even after 10 years here, I do forget that I'm kind of seen as a bit odd here when I want to connect more or swap numbers after I've met someone for a solid 10 minutes. It's not because I'm creepy, it's just that the American goal of small talk, as we talked about in the beginning, is to see if you can make an actual bond, compared to the British aim of small talk as a polite, but ultimately pointless for the rest of your life interaction. And that brings us to the end of this video. Please leave all of your small talk tips down below so I can get better at the British art of small talk, and if you're really not a fan of it, I have good news for you. In the same research that I mentioned at the beginning of the video, they've collected Britain's most favorite ploys for avoiding small talk in case you need new ideas. There's no shame in crossing the road and taking a completely different route that takes you way out of the way to avoid a slightly awkward and unneeded interaction. In fact, I think you get bonus British points for that. As always, thanks very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.
Yo, be sure to go to Girl Gone London and like and subscribe. I want to read some comments. My British Canadian father used to say that a North American would walk the length of a train in order to find another passenger to talk to, and a British would walk the entire length of a train in order to find an empty compartment. As a Brit, there's a funny situation I can get into with Americans. If I'm complaining about something, an American will try to fix my problem, like I was saying. They don't realize that I only want to complain about it, and that I have no intention of actually solving my problem. We engage in small talk with a lady at our church, and often she sits next to us, and we have a good chat. This has been going on for around 3 months now, but we still have no idea of her name, and she has never asked for ours. Now that's being English for you. My favorite small talk. Person 1, all right. Person 2, all right. End of conversation. The British sailed the 7 seas, explored much of the planet, conquered much of the globe, endeavored to touch every corner of every continent. Why? Anything to avoid the awkwardness of talking to the neighbor. For us, small talk isn't about interacting, it's a deflection tactic while looking for an escape route. My favorite small talk cheat here in England is, can you believe it's already month? It's guaranteed to just elicit a time just flying, right? I say that genuinely. Time is going faster and faster. Small talk is wonderful. Working in London in the 80s, early 90s, if I arrived at an overcrowded bus stop as a northerner, I would smile, say hello, and comment on the weather. Cleared the bus stop in record time, allowing me to easily access the bus and find a seat. That's brilliant. I flew twice from the UK to California by myself. The first time I was sitting next to an American lady who talked at me for the entire 10-hour flight. I think I knew everything about everyone she knew by the time we landed. She was lovely, but 10 hours. The second time I was sitting next to a man who was under a blanket before I even got on. Didn't get up or speak, but farted constantly for the whole flight. Not sure which was worse. Sometimes I want to do the small talk and get to know people. Sometimes it's really fun. Sometimes I do not at all. It just kind of depends on my mood and the day, you know? Well, this was a good video. Y'all, again, be sure to go to Girl Gone London and like and subscribe. She's great. I'd like to thank my patrons on Patreon, my Buy Me a Coffee folks. Thank y'all for watching this with me. Hope y'all have a happy new year, and I'll see you next time. Later.